Hi, I'm John Denny, and I want to introduce you to the basics of paddle surfing. The ideal conditions for learning how to paddle surf is low wind and low chop. We want to find a nice, calm day, calm water, and calm wind. Well, what I'm doing now is I'm getting in a prone position so that I can get away from any obstacles or hazardous condition. I want to get out into a little bit deeper water than on the shore. So I'll take the paddle blade and lie it underneath me with the paddle shaft up, and you barely feel it's underneath you. Now I can go like a surfer in a prone position and get to where I want to stand up. So the next step is to find the sweet spot of the surfboard. And we do that by getting to our knees. Notice I'm a little too far back. And that seems to be about the sweet spot right here. So I'll make a mental note of where the sweet spot is on the board, then I know where I want to put my feet. So now we've found the sweet spot of the board with our knees, and we're going to learn how to use the basics of the paddle. So the paddle is to be held a lot like a canoe paddle. Right hand on top, left hand on bottom if I'm paddling on this side, and I'll switch hands to paddle on this side. Now when I stand up, I'll use the T grip. But on my knees, I have to hold further down the shaft because I'm closer to the water. One of the common mistakes in paddle surfing is holding the paddle the wrong way. Common sense says it looks like it'll scoop better like this, but in actuality, this is the correct way to hold it, and you'll notice the angle of attack is straight up and down at the power point. Whereas if I hold it backwards, now it's pointing up. Now that we've found the sweet spot of the board and marked it in our minds, we're ready for the fun part, standing up. So the way we stand up is we place the paddle across the front of the board, get on our hands and knees. I'm going to place my feet right where I've established the sweet spot to be, and keeping my hips low. Get the paddle in your hand and stand up slowly. Remember to stay low and keep your knees bent. I'm going to place my feet right where I've established the sweet spot to be, and keeping my hips low. Get the paddle in your hand and stand up slowly. Remember to stay low and keep your knees bent. One of the big mistakes is people stand straight up and then they're off. Remember to stay low and keep your knees bent. When you feel like you're gonna fall, go down, not up. A lot of people make the mistake of getting up with one foot in front of the other. Okay? This is not the way you want to paddle. So now that we're standing up, we want to talk about proper paddling technique. So we know how to hold the paddle. The proper technique is to keep our arms relatively straight, because we're going to be paddling with our core, not with our arms. So if I have my hands too close in, I can't get a good stroke. What you want to do, arms straight, and it's sort of a downward and back motion. What you want to do, arms straight, and it's sort of a downward and back motion. Well, now that we've learned the basic paddling techniques, it's time to learn the basics of the turn. So the first thing we do is, if you paddle on one side of the board, you will turn in the opposite direction of the side you're paddling on. So that's our first turn, is to paddle on one side of the board and not switch sides. Another thing we can do is called a back paddle, is when we actually move the paddle blade from the rear of the board to the front. So if I want to turn to the right, I can paddle on my right side backwards and it'll turn me to the right, or I can paddle on my left side backwards and it'll turn me to the left. So using a combination of these two techniques is the foundation of the basic turn. Whether you're a beginner or advanced paddle surfer, you're gonna fall. And what we don't want to do is fall onto the board or onto the paddle. So when you know you're gonna fall, we want to fall to the side away from the board, okay? So the proper technique, we don't want to fall onto the board, we want to fall off and get away from it, so we do not get hit by the paddle or board. So when you're gonna fall, get away from the board as far as you can, and then leave the paddle, swim to the board, and then paddle back to the paddle. It's a relatively safe sport, and one of the only ways to really get hurt is to fall on the equipment. So when we're in a standing position, and I said we want to keep our knees bent and center of gravity low, if you get in an unstable situation with extra chop or something, we can always go back to our knees. And then we have stability. So I hope you find these tips useful. So now get out there and have some fun. Go out and paddle surf.